So the next thing we have to do is organize our scene a little bit so we can get this into the correct position. So I can navigate around in this one, remember, because this is my perspective view. But I want to put some of these things on display layer so it's easier to hide. So I'm going to open up my outliner here. And then the far right, you should see the channel box. If this disappears, you can open it again by clicking on this one in the upper right that has the sort of stacked squares. It opens up the channel box and the display layer. So I want to select the adult chimp bone, and then here under the display tab, click on the button to the far right. That will create a new layer and put the selected object on it. And I'll name this one bone or adult bone. And so I will do the same thing for the skin. You can see that one is selected. And I will rename this layer adult skin. There we go. So now what this allows us to do is to turn the visibility of these layers on and off. So I can have them both turned off. I can have them both turned on. Now these objects are still grouped. Just because they're on separate display layers doesn't mean they're no longer grouped. The group doesn't exist on either of these display layers, so it won't disappear. And the reason why I want to do this is so I can turn off the skin and see the skull, so I can put the skull into the Frankfurt horizontal. Now before we do anything else, let's look here in our front view and kind of get the skull straightened out as much as we can. Now, let me undo that. Only do this with the adult group selected. If you do it with the bone selected, then the group won't move and the skin won't move. So both of these, the bone and the skin, are children of this group. And if you move the parent, the children move. But if you move either of these children on their own, the other one won't move. So you have to make sure that it's the group that you have selected. So I'm just rotating the group around, going to W to get into the middle of the world. So just remember those shortcuts: W to go into move mode, E for rotate, R for scale. We don't really have to scale. But we want to try and get it as centered as possible. I'm going to rotate it around a little bit here. So I'm going to be popping around from view to view. So this looks pretty good from this side here. I'm going to freeze its transformations, modify freeze transformations to get my controller back to the middle sort of, and just turn it from the side. So here I'm looking at the ramus of the mandible. If I turn too much, I can see the one in the back. So I want to line it up so the one in the back is just hidden. Check in the front to see if we're sort of aligned. So I'm looking at this midline, this thick line in my grid. If your grid doesn't appear, you can turn it on in the view here in the panel menu. So remember, if I turn it here, then it will also turn everywhere. So I don't want to make too many changes, but that's pretty good. So I'm going to freeze the transformations again. And because I made those changes to the group, then it means that the skin also moved. So if I turn that on, you can see that that's also lined up. I notice now that when I exported the skin, I got the teeth again. I might go back and remove those and export it again without the bone. I missed that when I was doing it. Anyway, let's turn the skin back off because we want to put this skull in the Frankfurt horizontal. So the Frankfurt horizontal means that the bottom of the orbital margin is aligned with the top of the external auditory meatus. That's the hole in the ear here, on a horizontal. So it's actually pretty close to the Frankfurt horizontal now, but not quite. Before I do that, I'm going to get rid of some of this junk here. So you can see these pieces of geometry are floating around. That's some of the cartilage that was brought over. So in order to clean that up, the easiest way to do it is just to select the bone, not the group now, but the bone, and go to Mesh, Separate. And what that will do is separate any pieces of geometry that are actually separated from each other in space. They're not touching each other in any way. So it takes a minute to calculate here. So now if we look in the outliner, a whole bunch of poly surfaces have been created because there are lots of little bits and pieces. So the easiest thing to do is to turn off the skin, which it already is, and just click on the main part of the skull. So you can see that now I've got the skull selected, none of that other stuff. So I just clicked on the skull. If I click on one of these loose bits, it will select that and deselect the skull. Instead, I want to click on the skull and then back out here a little bit. Now if I hold down Shift and select everything, so I'm left mouse dragging to select everything, it will deselect the skull and then select all of the other bits and pieces. So it's actually selected some things that are part of the bone here. These are the spinous processes, or the stylus. There's some other bits and pieces that could be part of the skull here, like these look like they might be part of, it's too high up for the hyoid bone, but could be. But anyway, we'll just delete everything that we have selected, even these pieces. We're not going to worry about this right now. And then we're just left with just the skull. So we should see that here. We've got we've kind of complicated things here a little bit, but let's not worry about it because they're all still within the group. Okay, now it's a group within a group because it was a group that contained all those separate poly surfaces. I just deleted that little transform node there. Oh, that might have been a mistake. Oh, looks like Maya is crashing. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. It didn't crash. It was a close one though. So I just saved my scene. Now you can see there is still part of the vertebra here. And it's actually quite difficult to remove that, so let's just leave that here for now. So now we want to go back and align this into the Frankfurt horizontal. And the easiest thing to do is to create a cube, a flattened cube that we can use to guide us. Or we can use the grid line here. Actually, we should probably do it with the grid. It might be easier. So again, with the group selected, I'm going to go into the side view here. I can see the bottom of the orbital margin and the top of the external auditory meatus. And so I can hit W, and I'm just trying to line those two things up with this line here. Actually, it is kind of difficult to do without a cube, so let's do that. We'll create polygon cube, hit R to scale it up, and if you deselect it for some reason, you can see it's here in the outliner called P cube. So I just grab the middle square of my scaling handles, then I can grab this green one on top and just pull it down to scale the cube down. This is just a temporary thing so we can figure out whether this is aligned in the Frankfurt horizontal or not. So that's pretty close. If I just grab the group now, go to W mode. Actually, that's pretty good. I might rotate the meatus up a little bit. You can see, I mean, this thing is not perfectly bilaterally symmetrical, so this side is not quite on the line. Makes me think maybe I should rotate it around a little bit and align the bottom of the orbital margins. Now you can see this one does come down significantly more. So that's pretty good. And if I turn on the adult skin, we'll see that that's also aligned. Okay. So I'm going to save the file. Now, these are big files, like I've said, so they will take a while to save out. And the last thing we'll do is turn on the skin, select this. Now this cube, let's just hide this, put it on its own display layer like we did before, and we'll just call this FF cube for Frankfurt cube. Save that. And hide that. Now we'll do the same thing with this skull, and pardon me, the skin. So if I select the skin model, so just clicking to select it, and now I'll go to mesh, separate. I'll have to think for a minute. Okay, it didn't crash. I'm back. So I've just clicked on the main part of the skin, so just the face here. You can see all these little floating bits around. So now if I hold down Shift and drag over it, it will deselect the face and reselect the other bits and pieces. Now you'll notice I've got the adult bone display layer turned off. I don't want to select that inadvertently underneath and delete that, but now I can hit delete and all those little bits and pieces are gone, I think. So we've got everything here. Still have our group. We're now aligned in the Frankfurt horizontal. We've got the skin and the face, the skull aligned properly. The next step will be lighting and rendering this to put in the publication for labeling and working with in Illustrator. Thanks.